All right. Hello, and welcome everyone. I hope everyone's having a wonderful day and having a great afternoon. I really appreciate you all being here today. And thank you all for joining us at I Am New Orleans Conversation. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Jessica Dandridge. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. I am a longtime resident, born and raised here, but I'm also a community advocate who's been working in the community development space since I was 15 years old, making sure New Orleans is socially, economically, and culturally inclusive. My experience has ranged in many areas. I'm a Xavier grad working in policy, and my background is in community development, as I mentioned. And I also dabble a little bit in cooking. So I hope that you all see me as your advocate and also a local. Today, we're here to talk about the environment, though. So, particularly environmental justice and the foundations of our children's future. Tonight, we're going to talk with environmental justice advocates. Some of them I know very personally. They're amazing people. You're going to learn a lot from them. And specifically, we're going to touch on how our children's environment, I apologize, and our families' environments can affect their mental, physical, and behavioral health, and ways to address the immediate threats to protect our communities. For those unfamiliar with I Am New Orleans, it is a conversation series that is being led by the community to inspire discussion and action around critical issues of racial equity and that impact on our children and families. This conversation was curated in partnership with the Foundation for Louisiana, and we're so excited to again bring this to you. Before we get started, though, let's talk about a few housekeeping items. This conversation is offered in Spanish and Vietnamese translations and is closed captioning, which you can access at the bottom of your screen. This is also a community conversation, as I mentioned. So please join in, use the chat, and then also share your comments, your ideas, your innovations. We want to know. We want to keep the panelists talking throughout this entire conversation. We will also have polling questions, so that'll pop up on your screen. So don't be alarmed, and please again participate. Today's conversation will be recorded and available after the live recording with additional resources afterwards. And again, most importantly, please share this conversation with others. Using the hashtag I Am New Orleans. Again, that's hashtag I Am New Orleans. And you can find us on all social media platforms. Our goal, again, is to stimulate conversation. We want to educate, but also engage and learn from you all and learn from the panelists. So we really want to focus on the critical issues of racial equity and social equity. So please, again, share. Without further ado, I want to keep it really tight and make sure I introduce our panelists. First, but is Rashida Ferdinand, founder and CEO of Sankofa. We also have Andrea Chen, CEO of Propeller. We also have Ms. Monique Harden, Assistant Director of Law and Public Policy at the and Community Engagement and Program Manager at the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. And last but certainly not least, we have John Shell Johnson, Education Coordinator at Grow That Youth Farm and a Fellow at New Orleans New Orleans Youth Alliance. Before we get started, though, I do want to introduce one of our amazing developers for this and welcome Charmel Golden, interim CEO of the Foundation for Louisiana. I apologize, I want to do that earlier, but Charmel, we saved the best for last. You want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. We're really excited to be a part of a conversation really focused on our children's future. Building for our children's future requires us to tell the truth about what's happening today, and we are ecstatic that we have been allowed to hold space for that. And so we welcome all New Orleanians into this conversation. Low wealth community members, members of the LGBTQ community, our Black community members, Brown community members, Indigenous, Asian, and differently able, all create this city. And without you, we will not survive, let alone thrive. We're really excited to be a part of this conversation. I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica and just from a place of honor, also as an interim, being able to engage in this type of conversation with these partners. And I want y'all to look at these partners, very deliberately chosen, is an honor.
Thank you, Charmel. We appreciate it again. And so, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Obviously, the core of the conversation is around environmental justice. For those who are not familiar with the term, or maybe you've heard it, but maybe you're not clear about it, environmental injustice is identified as a purposeful degradation of a community, That can include pollution, neglect that is allowed by government, and in many cases executed by private investor-owned companies. Usually at the front lines of these communities are BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that lack the resources, the capital, the knowledge to fight against the corporations and government policies that allow for that. Well, where does this come from? Well, to be clear, environmental injustice has been around as long as Western expansion has been around. It is rooted in colonization. It is rooted in the degradation of the land in order to make profit and financial gain. There is no other correlation for where it comes from. Because it is a monopolization and in a capitalistic mindset that sees that all people, all living things, whether that be humans or plants or mammals, are profit driven. And the results again really are create a degradation of the land. That's the ecology, quality of life. That includes air, water, and again our food cycles and so on. And it manifests in many ways, especially in Southeast Louisiana and obviously in New Orleans. Historically, Black people have been at the front lines of the community, obviously from the relationship to enslavement, to Jim Crow, all the way fast forward today and redlining, and again, historical degradation and divestment of communities. And additionally, I want to also say that when we talk about environmental work, even though we're at the front lines, we're often not a part of the bigger conversation. And that is, again, a deliberate work that has prevented Black and Brown people from being a part of those conversations, right? I grew up here in New Orleans, and especially when I was younger, when you talk about environment, they're like, oh, I'm gonna be honest, you guys have probably heard, oh, that's a white people issue. Kayaking, tree hugging, what is all of that? That's not a Black people issue. But we have to dispel those myths. I talk to a lot of Black organizers who don't work in environment, and they say, well, we have too much on our plate. We got voting, we got police injustice, we have, all of these other things that are going on. But we still have to have the environmental conversation because it impacts every aspect of our lives. We can't fight for anything if we're all sick, if we're all dying, if we are dealing with pollution, if we're dealing with health issues and mental health issues. So it impacts us all, and it needs to be a part of the larger conversation. And it really impacts all aspects of our lives. And so, with that being said, I really want to lead it off with our panelists because environmental justice, the meaning changes depending on where you're located, where you're working. I work in water, so my definition is going to be different than, say, some of our panelists' ideas of what environmental justice means. So with that being said, I want to kind of kick it off to our panelists to say and ask you guys, how would you define environmental justice? Specifically, where do you see it in your field? And how are you really tackling that? Kind of give us a little description of that. I think I'm going to first hit it off to Ms. Harden, because you have been working in this for a very long time. How does Deep South Center, you and Dr. Wright, work on environmental justice?
Well, thank you, Jessica, and thanks for inviting me to this conversation. Glad to be here and join this incredible panel of powerful women. So with regards to environmental justice, it's really anything that's outside of your skin is your environment. And I think that's a real basic notion that we should all understand. So you have an environment in your home, you have an environment outside of your home, you have an environment wherever you go. And so thinking about that, for me, carries this notion of environmental justice is really being able to enjoy the healthful conditions where you live, where you work, where you study, where you worship, where you play. And not being able to have agency over that is where the injustice comes in. And you laid out some of that in some broad brushstrokes earlier. What we do at the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, founded by Dr. Beverly Wright, for the last 30 some odd years has been building the power of communities to make change. And that's through education and research and policy engagement and court action. And so we've done this up and down the river, infamously known as Cancer Alley, building up communities to be able to speak for themselves and fight for their future. And we have expanded since Katrina through the Gulf Coast region. So we do this with community-based organizations working collaboratively and in partnership with HBCUs. Right now, it's about 33 HBCUs that we partner with, along with community-based organizations.
Thank you, Monique. I'm going to pass it to Andrea because I want to get everybody's feedback on this particular question.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks, Monique. So for me, environmental justice is who's benefiting and who's also suffering the disproportionate impacts. And so just like Monique was saying, some people get to breathe fresh air. Some people get to drink really good tasting clean water, and a lot of people don't. Some people get to have parks and nice trees in their neighborhoods, and some people don't. So that's the benefit piece. And then the disproportionate impacts are around, who is suffering the most when there is an oil spill? Who is suffering the most when our coast is eroding away? Who has to move? And who's losing their livelihoods as a result, and whose health is being impacted? Who's getting cancer in Cancer Alley? So those to me are the factors around that's what defines the environmental injustice, is when the negative impacts are disproportionate. And so the work that Propeller does, we work with entrepreneurs and small businesses, and the environment and water is a big part of our work. And what we've seen is that there's a lot of funding currently around mitigating the negative impacts of our environmental degradation. But again, who's getting to benefit from these economic opportunities? And so a lot of the work that we do is helping to position BIPOC small businesses to get the contracts working on coastal restoration and green infrastructure, so that there is more of a shared economic opportunity. We are nowhere close for that being equitable, but that is a fight we're engaged in.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm going to pass it to Rashida.
Thank you. Environmental justice, for me, and the work that we're doing at Sankofa, is based primarily in the Lower Ninth Ward, with collaborations with groups, government partners, civic groups throughout the city and state and federal spaces. But it really is about having a right and opportunity to a healthy, clean place to live, and people having voice and agency to advocate for what they want, to advocate for what they should have, and being heard, being listened to, and policies and systems being addressed around those needs. There are a lot of challenges that we're experiencing directly with redevelopment in the Lower Ninth Ward. There's not only have been a lack of development, there's been the line has gone down. It's been the devastation has increased. There's been a lack of investment and movement forward. And it's an opportunity that we have working in collaboration with groups to bring this forth to our civic leaders and make them aware of it. Well, they are aware of it, but bring those resources in to make those changes happen. And the way we're addressing this directly is by doing intentional infrastructure, systemic change. We are building green infrastructure projects. We are working collaboratively with agencies and policymakers that have those powers of the needle to move it forward, and collaborate with us to improve the systems in which we're living in the neighborhood. We find that children are growing up in a space, you can say 15 years ago, or it was Katrina 2005, they're growing up in a space where this dysfunction has become normalized. And so these injustices are happening in people's lives where they believe that it's normal to have 12 feet of grass, blight around the areas, trash that's not being picked up, gas stations that are owned by absentee slumlords who are millionaires and have investments that are being well developed and maintained in other parts of the city, but they own property in our city, and it's just sitting there with pools of water that a child can walk into and die. We have open sewer drains, we have open storm drains, and they are not getting repaired or fixed. And so we're actively trying to find the resources. We found the resources actually. And then after you find the resources, it's actually pulling in those folks who are in our leadership roles, who have been elected officials or appointed to take on this work to do their job. And so our work as environmental justice advocates are directly working in partnership with our those groups that understand how to enforce and develop policy, but also working directly with our policymakers. We work in alignment closely with Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, who have been training and supporting our work, training our team members, supporting our work to bring more advocacy to our neighborhood and our community members as well.
Thank you, Rashida. You covered a lot, and there's some things I'm going to bring up again. John Shell, do you want to also chime in from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Environmental justice for me and the work that we do at Greater Youth Farm is centered around making sure that our young people are using their leadership skills, the ones that they possess already, and ones that that we learn together, to interact with the environment. So most of it is definitely around like getting outside, growing your food, understanding, you know, like what the different diets are, like meat eating, not meat eating, cutting less on salt and things like that, and why our environment like really pushes a lot of like food that we definitely shouldn't have often into our face more than they push vegetables and things that are good for us and have medicinal benefits, herbs, and just learning again how to interact with the environment. And yeah, and at Grown Up Youth Farm, we have workshops that are about like all of the injustices. So it means a whole lot to us that we're constantly having conversations with people who don't look like us. And that is intergenerational as well. So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I want to open up because I think all of you, I know all of the work that you guys do, so I would love to chime in, but I want to make sure you guys say, you know, maybe openly or at least be clear about who are the biggest perpetrators you believe of environmental injustices in New Orleans or in Louisiana or even nationally. And where are the biggest issues that they're causing? Because I want to really kind of really hone it in, right? For those who are like, well, environmental justice sounds like everything in my world is screwed up. Okay, great. But really be specific and say, this is a perpetrator, this is the perpetrator, and these are the issues it's specifically causing. Rashida, you kind of alluded a lot to that. Do you want to add on to what you are seeing as the biggest issues, and then again the perpetrators of the environmental injustices in our area?
Well, you know, we have to look at the levels and tier levels of power. And there's internal power that we have as human beings, of course, but I'm talking about the other aspects of power, which entail being able to have the resources to have your lights on, or if you are being impacted by global warming and climate change, how that's affecting your neighborhood when you didn't cause those systems to change. You didn't create this, you're the effect, the result of the global warming, but you're not the cause of it. And having the power to you live in your neighborhood, you're born in this neighborhood, but other folks are buying a property and not owning it, not managing it, not loving it, not loving your community and loving your neighborhood. And so we also have policy power, we have zoning, we have code enforcement, we have those kind of things that are not being enforced. So there's laws in place that are not being followed. And then when you try to enforce the laws or go in front of the powers that be, they may not support that and vote against the law that's in place. All that in a nutshell is, I think the people who we have to hold accountable are our civic leaders, the people who have created the laws and who are supposed to be enforcing the laws. We have to also hold responsible the corporations or the business owners who are stewards or who own these properties and are creating and supporting blight. We can't just hold the people who may not have power to own their homes or take care of their homes or revitalize them or rebuild them if they don't have the resources and finances and policies weren't put in place that give them those agencies to do that. We can look at the whole situation around road home properties and how that's impacted our neighborhood as well. So I think, you know, when we do our work around this lens of environmental justice and public health, is we have to really not just, blame the person who's the effect of this, but look at all of those systems that have impacted and created this dysfunctional system that we're living in, that's creating a neighborhood that is literally rotting away. And the folks who have the power to do something about it and work with us in tangent need to be held accountable.
Yeah. I heard a lot of, everything you said is spot on, but also it's really about systems change, right? And structural change that is historically been in place for hundreds of years. And then I saw in the comment box also Tashi, I believe I apologize if I'm not saying it right, but big industry. And I kind of want to that point, pin it to Monique, because Monique, you mentioned Cancer Alley, which is all big industry, or the industrial corridor. Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you're seeing in that area?
Sure. So I think it's extremely important to look at this in the context of how it penetrates racism. When you're looking at the manufacturing that goes on in the state of Louisiana. So if you look at a map of Louisiana, especially the section that goes along the Mississippi River Chemical Corridor, historic maps during the days of slavery in the state of Louisiana, you see these lots, kind of parallel lines fanning out away from the Mississippi River banks, going further inland. After slavery and after Reconstruction period, little known small companies like Esso, which is now ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, no one ever heard of them, realized that our state had plentiful resources in terms of oil and gas, and that the way in which the land was, the infrastructure in the land really made it possible for them to build in a way where they could move their products down the river and then up through the Gulf, in terms of where they're getting the feedstock, the oil, the gas that they produce and refine. And that is now, turned over into plastic production, furniture, carpeting, clothing, all kinds of materials, home construction materials, are, kind of come out of this basic oil, gas, feedstock that we have in Louisiana. And so when those companies came in, they got huge tax breaks in the state, where they don't have to pay any property taxes for a 10-year period. And guess what? They continue to get the property tax because what it requires is a capital investment. So you get bigger and pay no taxes over time. And so to this day, the companies that started way back when, early 1900s, still get the tax break when the law was put together in the 1920, 1921, the Louisiana Industrial Tax Exemption. We also have in our state constitution a provision whereby local and parish governments can go into debt paying for a company's equipment and facility construction. So we have a lot of lopsided giveaways to industries that follows slavery, and in some ways kind of mimics and continues it in terms of relocating white people away from the refineries as they were being built and operating, and not doing the same for Black communities. And over the course of time, we've got documentation where decisions that were made in terms of how the oil and gas companies would operate and where they would operate were done without any public participation or any input of Black residents, right? So the communities that were founded and settled and lived in as towns were not formally incorporated, and so they therefore did not have a governmental authority. Although the people who lived in the areas regarded it as such and had their own informal mayor and decision-making structure. And then the individuals who lived in the communities didn't have the right to vote. So when you look at, how did this get started and how does racism play in it? It's all really, racism really perpetuates and furthers it. And I'll just close by saying this, is that I think it's extremely important to look at where we are today with climate change. And so when I got into this work, the oil and gas and plastic chemical manufacturers would deny that their pollution was causing nosebleeds in children who lived in communities in the shadows of their smokestacks. That is advanced to denying climate change. And now where we are is that they are proposing a solution that allows them to continue burning oil and gas with false solutions that they're putting up as dealing with climate change. And so, I think this conversation is extremely important because we're at a real point of reckoning around how do we break away from those kinds of companies with that kind of profit agenda, making the decisions on how we live and how we regard this whole place that we call home, not just, our physical address on the street, but this planet.
Yeah. You touched on so many things, Monique. I'm like, I want to talk about all of it. But before we get in there, John Shell or Andrea, do you guys want to chime in on this part of the conversation? I mean, what are you guys seeing as challenges or barriers, especially John Shell, you being a youth, seeing New Orleans as it is today, I'm interested in also knowing, what are your feelings? I started this work when I was 15 years old, so I have a whole swath of perspectives, but you're, also my generation. What are young people facing and what do you see as the challenges?
Number one for me is like as a grower, it's about space to be able to do that. And having soil that isn't tainted and having water that, is something that you want to put on your plants and in your body. And also having like a defense against things like pests and stuff like that. Because what discourages a lot of our young people is like when you do go to grow something, it's like kind of connected to, a little bit to climate change. It's like we have so many like invasive species here in the South, where it's like imagining New Orleans as a swamp, which is like what it's supposed to be, and like the fact that we're a city, and like that's personally like the best thing about working outside for me, is that I can imagine the buildings and the concrete not being there. And I think as a grower and like really wanting to taste more food, eat more food, and enjoy food with my community and sharing recipes and things like that, like spaces to do that are not restaurant or like not like commercial, is something that is just necessary, and people do put effort into it. And I just always encourage more of it, like community gatherings where folks are, just expanding their palettes. And as a renter, like if I wanted to, grow my own things, I'm also like in this process of asking permission and like having like disturbing like the idea of like capitalism with like owning property and owning land. So yeah, I ended at that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's going to be helpful in that's one of the solutions to, I personally believe one of the solutions to environmental injustice, right, is getting back to our land, food sovereignty, but also really understanding that we're in a collaborative relationship with our environment. It's not me over the environment, it's us together working with one another. I want to get to you, Andrea, but first I want to ask a poll question, because I think the poll question would be a good driver for the continuation of this conversation. So the poll question should pop up in you all's screens really soon. There it is. And so the question is, how can we better inform the community about the environmental threats that are impacting our children? We talked a lot about the threats and the causes of environmental justice. So how can we better inform folks about it? The first one is informing families living near landfills on ways to clean and protect their homes during disasters. The second option is provide local announcements and alerts to authorities about chemical safety and disposal issues due to harmful chemicals released during floods and other environmental disasters. Informing the community about real estate disclosure so that buyers are informed about previous and future flood damage. That's my MO, and we don't do that on properties. And its buyers should invest in flood insurance. Continue combating stereotypes. Environmental threats are a future problem instead of a present issue. And the last one is it begins on a micro level. Citizens should receive information via direct mail and every year from their local community. So please pick one. I feel like all of them are really important, but we want to know what you guys are thinking of the most important issue. So I will maybe give it another 10, 15 seconds, and then we'll close it out. All right. Are we able to share the results? Provide announcements. Awesome. And I think there seems also to be the last three are pretty close. So Andrea, just hearing from the community, they want announcements about chemical safety, disposal of issues. That's something I want to just chime in, is that we're working on right now. And it's so hard to do. And I know Monique can speak to that. The agency that's in charge of supposed to be letting people know about this is DEQ, or Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. We're working on the water side and trying to get data on what's in your water and making it accessible and transparent is difficult in Louisiana. And I would even imagine it's purposely difficult because they don't want you to know that. So Andrea, especially you working in the business sector, what are the things that you see businesses can do, leaders can do, we can do to kind of help build out this information system, these announcement systems, or what are other things that people can do or leaders can do in regards to environmental injustice?
Yeah, so I was actually going to build upon what Monique was saying about big industry, because with on the business side, like so much of it is just profit driven, and that is the main thing that so many people have, and that's caused so much environmental degradation. And so so we've been working with a lot of businesses around the economic opportunity side, and there's, it's kind of like another repeat of what's been going on, Monique, what you were talking about big industry. And, and now that there's been so much environmental degradation, everyone's been hearing about our coast eroding away. Now there's billions and billions of dollars to fix that problem, right? And so again, we have that issue of like, well, who's going to benefit from it? And so I'll just give you like a few statistics. So the 2023 annual budget, next year's budget for the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority is $1.3 billion in spending over 12 months. And they're going to be spending about $1 billion every year for the next 10 years to help fix our coast, right? And so who's benefiting from that? And so when we talk about kind of business like practices, it's our elected officials, our government agencies, and also the prime contractors who are mostly like 99% not even from Louisiana, getting all of these billions of dollars. And so there's a lot that we can be doing right now to push to change the way that procurement is done, to change our leaders, to change the way that they do contracting, to put pressure on the big companies that are getting these billion dollar contracts to change the way that they are contracting with Louisiana Black and brown owned companies. And so there's a lot that we can do on that front.
Yeah. Andrea, you actually are a perfect segue, because the next question was about, or at least my opinion, where we need to go to is about climate change and the built environment. Every single person I think I heard mention climate change, but I want to also be really clear with the audience, because I don't want to assume we all know, especially in today's media where there's misinformation and disinformation. So climate change is the warming of the earth, and that causes extreme weather events that make our lives more difficult, and thus the earth uninhabitable. How did we get here? Because big industry that we just talked about, whether it be fossil fuel industries, chemical industries, plastic, even fashion industries, makeup, there's so many industries. Almost every industry, honestly, or every industry truly contributes to climate change through carbon emissions and other pollutants that go into the atmosphere, thus warming the earth. And when the earth is overly warm, it causes extreme weather events, as I mentioned, flooding, tropical storms, obviously fires, drought, etc. And the way we're going right now, if the earth reaches 1.5, well, we're past 1.5, but if we reach 3 degrees Celsius, the earth will basically be uninhabitable for young people like myself and Janshel and your children and families. How do we live like this? And we can't. And so the irony in this conversation is that environmental justice issues, and I think Monique touched on it perfectly, is that these companies have been here for a very long time. And so they've already been contributing to the degradation of the community surrounding these plants. And now climate change, they're contributing to the degradation of communities worldwide, globally, whether that be here in New Orleans or parts of Africa, Latin America, Asia. Everywhere we're experiencing this because of many of the companies based right here in Louisiana. And particularly, you mentioned infrastructure, Andrea. As you mentioned, there's millions, I'm sorry, I should change that, billions with the B dollars coming down from the Biden administration really to really mitigate some of this, right? So, you guys may have heard of the Infrastructure Jobs Act. That was $1.2 trillion, 1.2 trillion. This is the biggest influx of funding into the entire economy since the New Deal. And then just this week, Biden just signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which I really want to touch on, because while it was supposed to be a champion of climate change, we were, again, Louisiana residents, the state of Louisiana, we were sacrificed again. We were put on the front line to say, well, yeah, we're going to do all these things to mitigate climate change, but we're going to open up access to drilling for fossil fuels, access to natural gas, access to coal and other harmful sources of energy, at our risk. Who cares if we're sick? And so that made me very upset, because that's not what environmental justice is about. You can't say environmental justice and then sell us short. So I want to kind of open it up to the panel. What are you guys' thoughts about the built environment and the money coming down? But then this kind of weird conversation where you hear the Biden administration and local organizations saying environmental justice is important, but then, yeah, it's important, but we're still going to keep investing in fossil fuels that are harming your community. I'm going to open it up. Who wants to comment on that first?
I'm happy to.
Okay.
Please.
It just excites me so much because yeah, working with young people is like, how can we reimagine like our communities, our day-to-day lives, if like we can, like, since it's very necessary, we have to, right? And the people who are in office right now, they're not going to be in office forever. The policies that we're inheriting, like, all based off of hundreds and hundreds of years, like, we don't have to keep those in the next 50, right? So I just reimagine like the timeline, definitely, like that's happening right now, yes. And like bringing it down to like when we talk about our everyday lives, washing dishes, using the toilet, cooking food, how much of that would really change if we like if we go to something else more sustainable. And specifically I wrote that sustainable for us is like getting to a place where like Xing out chemicals, using as less water as possible, collecting water. And yeah, like the earth has its own resources, and being able to kind of use those in a way and teach those tools to community is like big for me.
Yeah. Monique, I know you chimed in as well.
Yeah, I think what John Shell just said really ties in well with Andrea's comments about like there's a bundle of money coming for coastal restoration, and will it protect communities that need it the most? And can it do so in a way that makes Louisiana residents better off economically, so that its jobs, entrepreneurial opportunities are realized with this kind of fund and resource to protect our coast, protect our land? That's the same question that we have for every federal dollar, right? Whether it's coming from the recent Inflation Reduction Act, which has some $60 billion for disadvantaged communities tied with renewable energy. Exactly how will that happen? And so, meeting the devil in those details is where we are right now, because when I was talking earlier about this reckoning, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Biden-Harris administration's program around this, an initiative called the Justice 40 Initiative, where 40% of federal investments are to benefit environmental justice communities around the country, or this recent Inflation Reduction Act. And I'll talk about one of the concerns we have about that. But just looking at that kind of community investment parts of all of this money, will it be over the heads of our communities where it comes and goes, outside contractors, we don't know where it actually went? Or will it be one that actually makes a turnaround? Like this is the moment where we can see the change, where communities have been supported, organized, and identifying what their priorities are, where they want to see these investments. They have that community knowledge and wisdom in terms of saying, this is where we can really, this was an asset that, like the Sankofa Wetland Park that Rashida has been giving loving, nurturing care to, and turning it back around into like just it's more than a community asset. It's like, it's my asset too. I don't live in the lower ninth ward, but I think people who come and visit feel like, this is a gem, this is really wonderful. But being able to really pour that money into people who care about where they live and see and have a vision for making it, really making those investments righteous ones. And so at Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, we are really, putting our resources and attention on the trainings and education and workshops we can do to help communities really kind of connect the dots between issues, right, to investments. And what would that look like? And how does that work in terms of understanding how federal departments, federal programs, funding mechanisms work? How can they advance their visions around, restoring community assets or creating new ones, whatever the case may be? Things like clean drinking water, for example, maybe more community gardens, bioswales, all of these things that we know are doable now, and solar, right?
Yeah.
All of these things are doable now, and more than just a nice idea, it's like our lives depend on it. Like 12 people died after Ida because they didn't have solar with battery storage. And when the lights went out and the sweltering heat, they died in their homes, right? And so that's real. So but we have the technology, we have the innovation, it's right at our fingertips. And it's just really about how do we cross over the injustice that has kind of kept that money and kept those resources away from from our people, our communities, our land, our homes, our neighborhoods, and turning the tide around on that. I think that's going to be a major challenge we have in terms of looking at the opportunities we have to realize and achieve environmental justice and equitable climate solutions that are community driven and based on community knowledge and wisdom, and supported by communities. That it really, there's no more disconnections between those two things. I think it's going to be the challenge we all have. There was a time when we talked about environmental justice without any sense of these resources. They're now available. They're now on the horizon. They're now on the way. And we have very, difficult, hard to understand, archaic, bureaucratic steps in the way of like, well, how do you file for money to clean my water? What does that application look like? And who's in charge of that? And how do how do you do that? And so being able to gain access in those tools is one of the things we're focused on at Deep South Center for Environmental Justice.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on water. I saw a couple comments in the chat, but I first want to bring it to Andrea because there was a lot of correlation about the dollars, follow the money, workforce development, especially Andrea, we work on advancing cities, so I know very deeply about the work that you're doing. Can you share a little bit about how these following the dollars, the Infrastructure Jobs Act, and getting more people, especially BIPOC communities, Black people, into these jobs so they be a part of the development of our communities and undoing the historical environmental injustices we're seeing?
Yeah, and I'll start out with just how, well, let me start out with, the state of affairs. So talking about CPRA, so Propeller is working with the Louisiana Chamber Foundation, the Foundation for Louisiana, Environmental Defense Fund to work on this issue around procurement, because it's likely less than 1% of this over $1 billion that they're spending every year going to Black-owned, BIPOC-owned, Louisiana-owned companies. That's minuscule. And so we've got to do better than that, but it's something pretty complicated. So to break it down for people to know, hey, this is something we need to be watching out for. Yeah. And because it's kind of complicated, it's hard to communicate. So it's harder to mobilize people around it. But I think that's a huge opportunity, because when do we have $1 billion in Louisiana? Every year, for potentially for our company. So that's just one example. So we've been working and meeting with their leadership to try to get them to shift and create new opportunities, because the way they're doing contracting right now, it's not possible for, most Louisiana companies to actually even bid for a contract. Yeah. So that's an ongoing process with a lot of our allies. And then on the city side, I know Solly was asking questions around, or had comments about state and local dollars. And so here in New Orleans, we have over $200 million right now for green infrastructure work. And that's part of the Advancing Cities work that we're doing with the Water Collaborative and Thrive New Orleans and many other folks. And so how do we get, that's so much less than the CPRA, but how do we get that money to BIPOC-owned companies? And so there's a lot of work being done. I know, and Rashida's been doing a lot of that work around the workforce side and training folks to get ready for those jobs. And Rashida, I hope you can talk about that. And then Propeller and Thrive, we're working with folks that maybe have a landscaping business, but have never categorized themselves as green infrastructure, but that's a new term, that's a new certification, right? So helping people make that switch, and then getting, getting contracts under their belt. And so one of the, I would say, great successes that have happened recently is the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority CAP project, Community Adaptation Program. And they just announced another $5 million for Gentilly residents, and it's to help residents kind of get more green infrastructure onto their property, up to $25,000. So we've been able to work with a lot of small companies, BIPOC-owned companies, to get their first city contract at maybe $25,000, $50,000, which is much more doable than trying to go after a $100 million CPRA contract from the jump. So those are just some examples.
Yeah, and there's a lot more examples across the city of local organizations, like we mentioned, like Thrive and Groundworks New Orleans. There's so many. I would go down the list, but first, we mentioned Rashida. I would love for you to jump in, because you're doing this work right now. You're seeing the impacts in the community. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing and the dollars and how you're connecting those dots?
So I do want to say that our model, which has worked for us to be able to have this level of outputs and outcomes, are through shared partnerships, working with mission-aligned organizations, groups, stakeholders, civic leaders, to be effective in this work. And so one of our partners, LA Green Corps, they're actually responsible for the workforce development work that we will be doing. We're starting in August. And so they have a model, they have a system that's already in place and set up. And we have the same approach to really wanting to see intentional change through with people who have been impacted and not having the social services that they need, or in vulnerable situations and need to have the skill sets to be in an equitable space, to have a job, to have wealth building, to have support their families. And so we're excited about this new partnership with LA Green Corps. But I also want to say the challenges of being an organization, clearly a Black-led organization. I am from the Lower Ninth Ward. I live in the Lower Ninth Ward. My parents are from the Lower Ninth Ward. My maternal grandmother grew up in the Lower Ninth Ward. It is still a significant challenge to get resources directly from our local government. There are organizations and groups that have more access to the window of monetary resources, to knowing when the policies are coming forth. They get input, and some other groups and other places that are not, we're not at the table. We have to fight to get at the table to get this information. And still, when we ask for that information, we still don't get the memo of when it's coming in and how can we achieve that. The wetland park that we built is beautiful. We have done 8 acres. We're doing 40 right now. We cleared the land. We're starting by our retention ponds in the next few days, or within the next 2 to 10 days, we should be doing that. But it took a ridiculous, phenomenal amount of time to get that work done. We have had the EPA administrator visit our park, love this park. I've gone to Mexico to do tours and discussions on this work with EPA team members, but it's tough getting people who are local in our city to come to our park. I have to pull teeth. We have to reach out to people. You have to tell them this is a great project. This is needed. And it's not just about the wetland park. It's about understanding that this is a part of development revitalization of a neighborhood that has significantly been disenfranchised and disinvested. What's really important as well, and I'm going to move forward, because I know we have other folks who want to talk about this, but is that when we talk about the monies and the dollars that are here and that are coming, that we make them tangible and realistic, and we are able to link them to how they can directly impact people's lives, and know that people need cash on hand as well. There's the small businesses that need the funds, but there are people who are being impacted by these disparities, who also need to have this access to it and understand the importance of the work that we're doing. A key phrase is for people to understand, and for us to understand, that we have to trust our land. We have to trust our water. Our land doesn't need us. We need our land. Our water doesn't need us either. We need our water. We need our air. And we need to respect that and honor that. And we have to also create a system where children are growing up to understand the importance of their natural environment, to understand the importance of wetland ecology, what green infrastructure means, what retention ponds and native plants and trees and wildlife, and how that makes us have a healthier space. This is what the Lower Ninth Ward was. This is what I experienced growing up in that neighborhood. This is what I know my father experienced, and a lot of people who have those memories. And we need to understand that cutting down our trees, cutting down our spaces, creating this great infrastructure, and also creating spaces where people who are legacy leaders in this space, when they don't have the opportunities to be a part of it and to be owners of this space, the stakeholders in the space on a real level, not just residents. I'm saying have real agency and power and ownership of their land. They have a space where they can be invested in the policies and be the recipients of it in a very active way. So hopefully we can have more of these conversations on a real engaging level with the folks who are in leadership roles around us. And I just want to make one more point to make a shout out, because for this work I've been doing for 15 years, this is the first time ever we have had investment from a state senator, Senator Joseph Bowie, who has actively used his power in the space of policy to make investments in the work that we're doing around revitalizing our corridor as a Main Street leader, as well as bringing in capital outlay funds to the wetland park, which have been sitting in the state budget space for about 3 years. When Senator Bowie came into power, he's made moves around that. So it's great to know that the money is there, but we want to also make sure that it is directly attainable to folks who are doing this type of leadership work, and all folks who are doing this type of leadership work. And we have this belief that Black people, Black women can take on the role and take on this work and lead it in our communities.
Absolutely. There's so much there. And I know we are short on time. We have 7 minutes left. I want to also ask people in the chat, please, we may not be able to answer your question, but we still would love to know. So please drop your question or your comment in the chat. That's still stirring the conversation. I want to make 2 points and then I want to drive it back home because we have about 6 minutes left. That because of environmental justice issues, because of pollution, because of the degradation of our air, our water, our environment, we will have some of these things we'll have to live with for the rest of our lives. Particularly, I work in water, and I don't want to. Water tends to kind of be its own conversation because it's huge, right? There's drinking water, there's sewage, there's green infrastructure. I want to get into all of it, but I can't. But I want to just acknowledge that our water systems, for example, will never be the way it was, 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. For things like PFAS and other pollutants, 1,4-dioxane and BTEX, which again, those are all pollutants that are in our water right now. They're called forever chemicals. So they're never going away. They're going to be here for 1,000 years. Think about that. And that's not just in our tap water. That is in your bottled water. That still lives in your Brita filter or whatever filter you may have at home. PFAS is forever. And that's my whole point about all of this is that we're losing trees. Trees don't just grow overnight. They're going to take years to grow back. We're losing our overall air quality. And that's going to take hundreds of years to get back to where it used to be. It is important that we start this work now, but also know that this work is a continual effort and that we have forever changed our environment. When I say we, I'm saying human beings, not you and I. But we as human beings have changed our environment. What are we going to do about it? And so I want to maybe ask each participant to take 30 seconds or 1 minute to just say, what can people do? I know we have lots of people in the chat talking to their policymakers and agencies and voting. What can people do specifically and what resources are available to them? I'm going to start with Monique and then work our way around. Monique, what can people do and what can they do to take action now?
One important action that I think overlays everything we've discussed is a real lived everyday experience for the moms and the grandmothers of the Gordon Plaza community whose homes were built on a toxic dump, formerly a city dump here in New Orleans. And that fight has been over 30 years long, where they, were able to get in the city's land use planning provisions around their relocation, and then fight for a budget that would realize and allocate those funds. And now they are finding more difficulties with getting those funds distributed now that they've been secured, agreed upon, authorized. They are finding more roadblocks in their way to getting that money so they can get off that toxic dump. And I think, it really behooves all of us, I think, to be able to find ways of being in solidarity and in support. And, that can begin by reaching out to the residents of Gordon Plaza. They have a Facebook page, and also talking to our city council members and our mayor about getting that fund and getting that money distributed to all those, to the residents of the Gordon Plaza. It connects very much with what we're talking about and how we can do better. The resources are here, but still, what's the problem? And again, and seeing it kind of time and time again, women of color, Black women at the helm, fighting for their lives, fighting for their families and their communities, and being able to put all the pieces where they can finally get this pot of money to get them off the land, and now finding that it's not as simple as that, and that there's roadblocks that are and shadowy, and that shouldn't be the case. It should never be this hard. And I think it behooves all of us as New Orleanians to stand in shoulder to shoulder and in solidarity with the residents of Gordon Plaza. That would be one major thing. If we can get that justice finally delivered, I think it can open the door to more things that's possible in the city of New Orleans, because it would show that communities matter and people matter, and you don't have to be, someone who lives in a particular neighborhood to be able to get things done, or be in a particular family or know particular networks to be able to get things done. It would really just create more fairness and equity in our city. And then in addition to that, I would just add that there's so much more we could be doing to moving away from the continued production of the forever chemicals along with fossil fuel burning. And that's really looking at green chemistry, replacing toxic chemicals with green chemistry, and certainly replacing fossil fuels, your oil, gas, and coal burning with electric, with solar power, renewable energy. And so those are things that we already have some structures in place for here in New Orleans with a community solar program that allows anywhere in the city of New Orleans the ability to be able to subscribe to get solar power brought to your house. So you don't have to use Entergy's power, you can use solar power, as well as looking at ways in which we can get more distributed renewable energy to our community centers, restaurants, churches, and homes for everybody here in the city of New Orleans would go a long way in terms of saving lives and making air healthier, because we would be reducing power plant pollution, and which adds to the climate threat that we all face.
Thank you, Monique. We're almost at 7, and Monique touched a lot of amazing things, but Andrea, can you maybe in 30 seconds drop some resources and things that people should be aware of?
Sure, and I would just echo everything that Monique said, because the more that we can support the existing efforts, that we can all come together, like you said, shoulder to shoulder to support the efforts of so many people, that would go a long way. And the other thing I would say is that I believe it's always okay to ask. We are all part of institutions, and every institution buys stuff. And we can all ask our institutions, like, how are you buying your stuff? Do you have an equitable procurement policy? Like, where are the dollars at, the university I work at, the hospital that I work at, where are they going? And I think the more that we have people asking those questions of their agencies, we've got to be tracking the dollars, but a lot of it is private, a lot of it is government, but a lot of it goes to the private sector too. And so we can't forget about that. And, every organization, I believe, needs to have some kind of equitable procurement policy. So I would say that's one thing that everyone can start asking if they haven't already.
Thank you, Andrea. John Shell, what would your one resource or takeaway be from this conversation?
I am always excited to know about how I can bring information back to young people in ways that they can digest and are able to take action in their own ways, and also do their own research in order to have more weight in the conversation. So that's what I'm taking away. I'm taking away a lot of these policy names and a lot of things to follow in order to have a deeper and more richer conversation with the young people I work with.
Wonderful. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Rashida, you had mentioned you dropped so many gems as well. What is one takeaway that you want the audience to leave with?
I would say compassion and empathy. I was talking to Dr. John Buller yesterday, and he's one of the colleagues of Dr. Wright in the environmental justice movement. And I asked him, he thought he was an urban planner, and he works in the urban planning field, but he's a sociologist, as Dr. Wright is. And looking at these things from the framework of who people are, how they live, where they come from, what they need, and understanding, all of this is a big foundation on how we decide where we want to implement resources, dollars, how we connect with people, how we care about people. And compassion and seeing yourself in people, in their lives as well. Layers to all of the things that Andrea and Monique and John Shell are saying. So ditto what everybody's saying around that.
Thank you. So the takeaways I heard are education, especially with our young people, supporting current activities, especially around Gordon Plaza, supporting clean energy and renewables, looking into procurement, follow the money. I think that's a big one. Follow the money, follow the dollars, and compassion. And I want to double down on that, is that the whole goal of environmental justice, the entire goal of climate change mitigation is thinking about everything in collaboration, in connection to one another, getting back to our indigenous practices of looking at one another not as a profit margin or looking at one another as an other, but looking at one another as a community. Because my impact impacts someone else's impact, and your impact impacts everybody around the world. We are not in a silo. We are not in a vacuum. We are in this together. So if we work together, we will defeat the issues, or we will fall together. And I know we won't fall. We have so many amazing activists and organizations just here in Southeast Louisiana. We haven't even talked about the rest of the state or the rest of the Gulf South or the Gulf Coast, We have powerful women. Look at this panel, all of these women doing amazing things. And this is just a snippet of all the people that I know doing amazing things and really breaking barriers. So I really, really want to double down on the part of compassion, empathy, and community and collaboration. That's what's going to get us to the next level. That's what's going to prevent environmental injustice and reduce it and change and create new systems and structures. That's what's going to get us to liberation. So with that being said, I want to thank every single panelist. Thank you again, John Shell, Rashida, Monique, and Andrea. I also again want to thank Charmel and the Foundation for Louisiana for hosting this. Again, if you want to keep the conversation going, go to IamNewOrleansVoices.com. Again, that is IamNewOrleansVoices.com, and then use hashtag IamNewOrleans to keep the conversation going. Again, the organizations here for you to look up more information is Propeller, Sankofa, Grow That Youth Farm, Deep South Center for Environmental Justice, and I'm with the Water Collaborative. And with that being said, again, thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you.